This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
We are back. My name is Xander, Lofts, and welcome to the Saturday Social. It's been a while, hasn't it? I've moved house, started a new academic year, but in this show I would like to talk all about A-level. Are more students taking up which subjects are taking up more students, and is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What about grade boundaries? All of this to come.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Okay, well, let's hope this, as you were in the first 15 minutes, you'll know that everything seemed to go wrong at once. So welcome back. My name is Xander Lofts, as I said, and this is the Saturday Morning Social. So my role at my school, as I am the head of A-level maths, so I teach further maths, which I very much love, and the normal A-level. And I have got a very special guest on today, someone who I've actually followed on the YouTube channel for a long time. Now, I can't plug it fully, being a non-commercial radio show, but if you have taught A-level maths, you will know him probably very well, and you'll have used his videos for your students. It is Jack Brown of TL Maths. Can you hear me?
Hello, can you hear me?
Excellent, there we go. All right, I'm not sure what happened there about...
Hooray!
Yay! 8 different things at once. So, I mean, first and foremost is, this isn't the sort of thing I'd say to any guest I had, but I genuinely think that TL Math is probably one of the most accessible YouTube maths channels, because there are hundreds of them out there. I wanted to do one, but I never found that I had the time. Now, I know that you integrate it into your teaching in that you do a lot of things in your classroom. And I know there was a video I watched where you showed calculator techniques to what I believe was a class. And this is kind of in the Eddie Wu style of recording a lesson while it's going on. But I know you do, or I assume the main videos are done outside of hours in your classroom.
Yes. So that specific one was just showing off one of the new calculators that we had. But usually, I just do it after college for a couple of hours. That's my plan.
Well, I mean, I suppose I work at boarding school, so my hours are quite late, and I often have sort of boarding duty. So I sort of put that to one side for now. But I think that maths communication is really important. I do think A-level maths is probably the most supported A-level there is out there, because so many people are doing it now. I think I read that over 100,000 people in summer of 2024 entered in for A-level maths, about 11% increase over last year. And not only did about 11% more people study A-level maths, 107,427, but with a 2-to-1 ratio of boys to girls, but the grade boundaries also went up about 9% across the board. So are exam boards overcorrecting, or do you think are they going to level off with the current grade boundaries, or do you think they're still in that experimental phase post-COVID, or is this sort of the settling point?
Oh, well, the grade boundaries have really fluctuated over the last few years because of COVID. And the first round that came in, we really didn't know what we were looking at and what we were going to be dealing with. But the grade boundaries between the different exam boards have really stretched out now. I don't know how much I should kind of like go into that, or how much people should read into it. But yeah, it's peculiar because you're kind of now getting a different experience from each of the different A-levels, I would say. There's different exam boards for A-level maths, which I don't think is a bad thing, personally. I quite like the idea of the choice. I know some people would prefer us to go on to just one exam board, but I'm not too keen on that idea.
I'm kind of with you on that one. So as at an independent school, we teach the IGCSE, which is theoretically more accessible for students with English as an additional language, but also I find is potentially a better. Well, I think because they're both calculator papers, one could argue that it's easier, but it has a higher ceiling. So there's things like differentiation and more advanced functions and some other things. And I think it's a better springboard into A-level maths. And I know that there are very few variations in the A-level syllabi, because your channel does, I think, pretty much all of them, but there is a lot of crossover. So I know there are certain things like interval bisection that isn't in the edXL A level that I teach, but it's 99% similar. So having that option I do think it is a good thing, but I have to say I don't know about the grade boundaries across more than I think the edXL and AQA ones. And I'm looking at the edXL ones in front of me because I had to do a departmental analysis for A-level based on like how the grade boundaries have changed. I'm looking 2024, a grade B is 167 marks, and in 2019, a grade A was 165. So it's now harder to get a B than it used to be to get an A. And the content hasn't changed across those 5 years. So what was happening, because 2019 was pre-COVID and the grade boundaries were, one could argue, perhaps slightly lower than they could be, but then cut forward 4 years and they went up 16% at the top end, 24% for an A, average of about, 12%, because that's slightly lower at the lower end. But what has fundamentally changed in the A level to move the grade boundaries that far? Were too many people getting A stars in 2019? I only started teaching fully in 2018, so a more experienced practitioner would potentially be able to give me an answer on that one.
Well, I think what we must remember is that there was only one exam entry from the current specification before COVID. So we only had those 2019 cohort that went through. And then, of course, we had COVID. So the 2019 papers, I don't think I don't think they were any more difficult than what we're currently getting. I think the exam board was settling into how the board should look, how the exam paper should look. But I think what the impact was you were going from the modular system that it would have become very predictable to your linear A levels. So teachers it was their first time through teaching it. They had to get used to it. The students didn't have exam papers to work from or past papers to really look at. We didn't really know 100% like what those exams were going to look like. And so the consequence was when we had so much more problem solving injected into A-level math, our students were very much being taught on some good old spec material. So they weren't as well practiced, I don't think, and well prepared as they are now. The consequence now is that we've had a few years for AQA, the grade boundaries have gone, up and up. And now I think they're in a place where I like them. I want it. I can find I think that's where it should be. Whereas if you compare with, let's say, OCRA, their papers, if you look at them side by side, the AQA and OCRA papers, you could be forgiven for thinking that they're of different qualifications. OCRA has gone in a different direction where their stuff's quite tough. Their grade boundaries reflect it, but their grade boundaries a lot lower.
It's a little bit quiet on it, but I think you're saying that the OCR was quite a lot lower. Because I've got the AQA ones in front of me. So A star 2, that's similar to maybe a mix of last year's and this year's grade boundaries looking they're slightly more forgiving than our ones this year. OCR, let's have a look. Grade boundaries. Let's have a look. So last year, OCR for maths. Let's have a look. We have got. Oh yeah, so out of percentages. Well, that is low, isn't it?
Yeah.
67% for maths and stats, 74%, and for an A star. And then one could argue that an E grade at 35 marks across 3 papers is now. I don't know where I lie on the opinion of if you get an E grade, it's better to get an E than a U certainly. But I mean, is there a sort of certain dumbing down? Because if you're going to fail an A-level student, is 35 marks across 3 papers? What would be the criteria for failing a student? I mean, any kind of paper, not just mathematics, but any kind of A-level, given the sort of university importance. What's generally the criteria for a student failing a course? Because I mean, I don't quite know where the E to U, what differentiates an E student from a U student. I wonder if you've seen kind of markers that you would think, oh, I understand why the grade boundaries at the bottom end are set to that.
Well, I'm not an examiner, so I can't say what arguments go into choosing where that boundary is every year. I mean, obviously, it's a U grade, as a failure across 2 years. We don't want any students to have done that over 2 years. We don't want to say that a student has failed, but there's got to be some kind of cut-off. Now, if I'm doing an assessment within my department and I'm looking at the E grade, then I try and go through the paper and think about what marks do I think the students should be able to get? What are the lowest of hanging fruits that they should be able to get? And the consequences, right, I add those up, and that's where I place my E grade boundary. So that's essentially how I do it in practice. But how they kind of decide on it from a national level, I'm assuming there's also got to take into account proportions that they want also to fail. So unfortunately, that's part of it. But I expect it's kind of a mixture.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's got to be some kind of arbitrary cut-off point. But yeah, I tell you, that's a good point about what should a student be able to do after 2 years of A-level content. It can't just be, I suppose, the GCSE-based content, because that would have been like a previous requirement. But we do see a number of students. I would really ask the question is, why do students get low grades in those subjects? Because now it might seem like a naive question, but this leads me into my point about what should the minimum grade for any A-level in a subject be? Should it be up to the teacher's discretion? And obviously there should be special cases, but how does a grade 7 GCSE math student get to a grade E/U in A-level, assuming no kind of major changes? Is it perhaps that it's easier to get a 7 in GCSE than it is to get the equivalent, what would be a sort of a B in A-level maths, given 2 years of growth? Or is there something else? Is there a other kind of confounding factor for an otherwise promising student not meeting the standard? And obviously, if a student didn't get a high grade at GCSE maths, it would predict a DEU at A-level, but that's where the minimum grade requirements would come from, one would imagine. So what do you think causes that to happen?
Well, we're starting off with the easy questions then.
Yes.
What causes that to happen? Well, let me take where I work as an example, just to start off with. So a couple of years ago, I started doing analysis on, because we had from the very outset we accepted sixes onto A-level maths. So back in the first round of the current specification, and obviously that was also the change from, that was the same year I think as the change from letters to numbers. So at that time we didn't know what a six was. So we accepted sixes to nines. And what I've been doing since then is I've been analysing the sixes performance across the 2 years, so that we can get a better idea of what they start with to what they end up with. And the key thing is that if you come in with a six to maths, you could potentially get any grade. And I've seen it happen. I think over the years, I've seen one six turn into an A star, which was incredible to see. But that's one. And I've seen a small handful of A's, some B's, some C's, lots of D's, lots of E's, and a handful, and lots of U's as well. I'll say a lot, because if you also take into account not all of those students make it through from enrolment to the end of the 2 years as well. Usually we were seeing let's say 40 to 50% of that cohort of sixes come through. They didn't last to the end. And some of them made that choice very, very early. Some of them later. And that was an issue. So the consequence, the knock-on effect was that we did not feel like we could safely say that sixes were coming in and we were adding value and doing well by them. So 2 years ago, we finally decided to raise our entry grade to a 7. So this is our first cohort through currently. Our first years have gone up to a 7. And, this wasn't through any means of not trying, because obviously we put on extra sessions. The first time through, actually, we did, because we have 3 lessons a week, we put on 4 lessons a week for those who came in with the 6. So, we went above and beyond our ways of trying to make sure that we could get them through, but there was still the struggle. So I think what was coming through was that some students could come through onto A-level maths with a 6 without having really done a lot of the high-level algebra. And so when they were hitting logarithms quite early on in the course, and the rearrangement of equations, they really struggled. And that struggle went throughout the 2 years. And it's not just the content either, because, you and I will both know that the step up from GCSE to A-level isn't necessarily the difficulty of the course, but it's keeping up with it. It's the pace that you need to go through, the notes you have to take, the extra revision you've got to do on the side. And a number of students coming through with a 6, hadn't been as well practiced in doing that and being able to kind of keep up. So they also fell because of that reason. So I know that schools and colleges have very different entry criteria. There's a couple of colleges close to us who offer A-level maths with a 6. We offer with a 7. I think I know of some schools that do 8s, entry grade with an 8. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but they will have their reasons. But yeah, it's from our college in perspective, A-level maths has apart from further maths, has the highest entry criteria, but is still the most popular course in our sixth form college. We enrolled 570 into the first year this year. So, huge numbers, even with those high restrictions.
So I'm coming from the other end, where I'm at a very, very small independent, where admittedly we do get quite large class sizes. So I've got a class of 20, but a lot are, it's actually my lower six are all international. And a lot of them are one-termers. So we don't have the equivalent sort of letter or no number GCSE grade. So we do a lot of it on baseline assessment. So for example, a lot of the students will know topics like or different ways of doing a quadratic formula, but they won't have done trigonometry. So our A level is sort of a slightly more streamlined to make sure that concepts that aren't covered in the EdXL A level, like basic right angle triangle trigonometry, are included as well. But so you said that you recently changed from a 6 to a 7 entry grade. We did that as well this year, but in my previous school they did take 6s, and I did actually see, because now you mentioned it, we had a grade 6 student who went from a 6 GCSE. They started A level maths, and they weren't sort of doing so well. And then COVID hit, and out of the blue, they just randomly decided to start teaching themselves maths and further maths, and got an A star. And now they are a maths YouTuber, quite a small one, but they've gone to university to do maths and engineering. They do maths on YouTube, and it can happen. And I'm really pleased for that student who managed to get the most out of A level maths. So I agree that those changes can really happen, and it can go the other way. But I mean, one of my priors is I do think a 7 is probably for me would be the minimum grade requirement, because of the prior knowledge one needs to have. And although we don't, I know some grammar schools speed through the first 4 units because they're assumed to be prior knowledge. We don't. So being an independent school with a lot of internationals who go home at the sort of start and end of term, we do get a bit of missing time. So you mentioned bringing in an extra class for the grade 6 students to catch up. We do similar sort of intervention to make sure that the students have enough time to cover the course, because we can't always assume they've got that background knowledge, and we miss a lot of time. I find that that I've got an active Pearson Active Learn account, and there's a course manager that says you should spend 180 hours across these topics. That we don't get anywhere near that time. Teaching time. How do you manage? Do you actually manage to get the hours in, or do you condense parts of the course? Do you skip over certain things, assuming that they have that prior knowledge? How do we time it more efficiently? Because my plan at the moment does work, but I feel like I could refine it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's tricky because it's also difficult for it is difficult to get everything in and to the standard that you want it to be. I would say that we still spend time on everything, and everything does get covered and taught explicitly. So, for example, our first few lessons are on coordinate geometry, quadratics, indices, and surds. So stuff that they will have met at GCSE, that obviously we are then taking beyond. So the things in there are things in there that I would expect students to be able to do, and we've got some enrolment work that they can work on, that they've been given prior to their first lesson, that they to crack on with, and a lot of those kind of key skills are in there. But what we do is within that is we talk about calculator skills. So we're bringing in how to use the calculator, what does the calculator do, and tell you straight from the off. Because we do AQA, AQA is very calculator friendly. So they essentially say that anything you can do on your calculator is fair game. So we're teaching them that from the outset. And this year was the first year that we've actually put in quadratic modelling within that as well. So we had previously kind of like left that to one side, I would say, and we didn't really teach it explicitly. So think questions like you might have like a fountain spraying a stream of water, and you're modelling that with a quadratic, and that kind of thing we taught explicitly when we got to trig, but now we're teaching that very, very early on in the course. So we're trying that out there instead, because AQA seem to like to test those questions in that way. So, yeah, as I said, I'm going off a bit of tangent there, but it is tricky to kind of fit it all in. But it's knowing kind of like when would be best to embed this skill. Shall I focus primarily on this skill? And what another thing that we've tried to do from last year to this year is that we all use kind of a similar bank of PowerPoints that I've built up over the last 10 years, and we've adapted and adapted and adapted. And this year, what we've done is we found that we were essentially teaching them every possible scenario, or trying to, which I was starting to see as more kind of spoon feeding. So we went through all of our PowerPoints and did what we referred to as a honey, I shrunk the PowerPoints, and essentially butchered them down until we had the teacher going through a few key examples, but then the students would take the remaining half an hour of the lesson to have a go at these other ones that were only just slightly different, and that then they could puzzle out themselves. And I think that has been much better, particularly to support the strong end, who want to get on, and they can try more challenging problems. But it then also allows you to focus on those students who aren't quite getting it, and you can go through another couple of examples with them and prioritize their learning. So I think that the issue is that you might see, I've got all of this stuff to get through, but maybe you only need to go through 2 of those examples for logarithms rather than 5. Go through 2, see if the students can crack on with the remaining 3 themselves. And so that might kind of like ease your time up.
Well, that's something I've tried. I mean, the first thing you mentioned about what skills are best to embed early. When I write the scheme of work for myself and the other teacher who teaches A-level maths with me, is that I try and split it so that one teacher does similar related topics, and then the other does the other ones that don't require that prior knowledge. So I know that the first year of Edexcel A-level you can kind of do the quadratics, and then equations and inequalities, and then the graphs, and then trig, and then mechanics and vectors, because that flows quite nicely. And then the other teacher can do sort of the indices, the factor theorem, binomials, logarithms. So you get this kind of almost 2-tier in that there are things that you can teach simultaneously that line up quite nicely together. But I don't know if that's because there's 2 ways of doing it. There's 2 teachers who just take it in turns teaching the same topic, and then 2 teachers who teach different parts of the course. And I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on that later. But on what you said about spoon feeding them, I think we all do that at some point in our lives. And I used to think, well, if they see every exam question that's ever come up so far, they'll have that knowledge and experience. But then something new comes up, and you think, well, we didn't see that already. So I'm teaching further in the further maths. I am teaching the core pure 1 vectors at the moment, which has about, I think, 15 different skills you need to do. So I've encouraged my students to, yes, try a bit of everything, but to really focus on, for example, vectors. It's the different things you can do. You read a question, and unless you're incredibly good at vectors, it's not immediately obvious what the path you need to take is. So it's very much kind of in the diagrams, and it's more learning it from first principles rather than, well, if this, then memorize that. And one of the things I tell my students is don't memorize formulae, understand where they come from, and then implement them. Because if you're memorizing the distance from a point to a plane formula, there's a modulus, there's pluses, signs, and minus signs, and a big square root over direction vector. There's a lot to remember there, and in the pressure of an exam, I think that is in the formula booklet, but as an example, you don't want the students to memorize formula. You want them to have that conceptual understanding, because that's where the problem solving comes from. So if you teach kids to be really, really good at binomial expansion, the formula, but then they do some subtle variation where there's an extra bracket outside and it looks unfamiliar because you haven't shown them that, it does go into that mindset of, oh, I haven't prepared for this, now I can't access this question. And I do agree that it's not about spoon feeding, it's, teaching. You've got to teach that kind of creativity. So I have gone over a few of the PowerPoints I use with more of a focus. I haven't quite done what you've done with the Honey I Shrunk the PowerPoints, which excellent, by the way. But to make sure there's sort of enough visual and conceptual understanding so that we're not just speeding through, oh, let's go through every mock paper. Because I do like to go through past papers as practice, but it's not a silver bullet, because people can do all the past papers, practice it, and still struggle on the real exam. So
I think if I just chip in with that, because if there's a topic that's more like this than any other, I would probably say it's proving trigonometric identities. So here is a topic that has loads and loads of possible ways of doing it, and there's lots of tricks of the trade. So you're looking out for sine squared plus cos squared is 1. You're looking out, can I factorize this? Should I add the fractions together? Should I turn a tan into a sine over cosine? And sometimes some methods work and sometimes other methods don't. And you're really having to kind of play around with it. And there's a topic where I go through maybe 1, maybe 2 examples at most. And then it's about, right, off you go. Let's see how you get on and play with these things. And as they kind of go through these examples and come up with innovative ways of doing it, I'll pop them on the board so that everyone can see, oh, wow, oh yeah, maybe multiplying top and bottom by the conjugate, like with surds, might be a good idea if I spot this. So that as a method of teaching, I think, is very powerful, and a way of them kind of developing those skills and problem-solving skills themselves. I do think the worry that, and this was essentially, what I was saying was, you could end up going through 7 or 8 different types of question and going, right, I've done that, I've filled up my time of the lesson, that'll do, and the students really haven't had any time to practice it. And I think that's my worry. And I've wanted to try and get the students doing more practice, more work themselves, so they can make those connections themselves.
Well, that's an interesting take, because it's that balance between not exactly lecturing, but delivering content, because you've got to deliver it before the students can kind of synthesize with it, is the word I was looking for. Now, my further maths class, I've got a student who usually gets it before I've explained it, but that's, I suppose, a rare privilege. And I have in the past perhaps gone into kind of LARPing as a university lecturer and delivering content and then expecting them to synthesize it outside of the lesson. But yes, that on the topic, we were talking about trig identity questions. There was, I don't know if you've seen it, but the Edexcel AS 2024 paper had an absolutely diabolical one where, as far as I am aware, unless you know year 2 trig identities, you have to make up a 1, like a multiplier by 1, and then just change it into sine squared plus cos squared out of thin air. So that was a fun one. So yes, I find trig identities really do mess with some students because it's unless they're visually very good at it, they're quite difficult to get done visually. Like the visual proof for the addition formula is quite nasty, and if you've got a very able class that might really love that, that's great. But I think what I've found, as I have found, sorry, some classes tend not to like proving the addition rule formulae, and it is in the formula booklet. So it's that kind of link back to earlier about what can one cut out, or where can one save time to deliver the more important key skills. And I think with the trig identities, knowing all of the double angle and addition formulae for integration, for example, would that, so rather than sort of showing them every permutation, it's get them to sort of play around with it as a kind of a problem solving exercise to see how they think and nudge them in that direction, because that is generally what I try to do. But I have come across the idea of the situation where students don't have any idea what to do, so they'll look at a trig identity and they'll know all the formulae, but they don't have that kind of, or they don't see the first few steps. And that's where I feel like I could potentially be doing something a little bit better in show don't tell. But if they don't have the first step, what's the best way to nudge them in that direction for something like a high level difficulty skill?
Yeah, and you were talking about further maths vectors, and that is one that students find notoriously difficult to visualize and to think of ways of going around it. And when I've taught further maths vectors, and I'm thinking, right, I'm going to have to go through and explain how these things come about, and I'm going to have to tell them. I'm going to have to probably go through more examples with that one than maybe I would with the trig proofs, for example. And there's no one size fits all here, but I'm just thinking about wanting to get them doing more, making those connections more. I mean, the trig proofs one, you're up against other factors as well, because it's not just dealing with trigonometry and the sine over cos is tan and things like that. It's the fact that their algebraic fractions work isn't necessarily very strong. So, you go into the lesson and I think, right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to practice adding fractions. And I'm going to practice maybe a bit of surds with rationalizing the denominator. So it's kind of like feeding in those skills earlier on to get that practice in. But yeah, I don't think there is one size fits all for it. And some topics, as you say, just need example after example. Let's say I take integration by substitution as another one. That's one where I do quite a lot of scaffolding and going through, right, I call it, this is a level 1 example, and this is a level 2 example. It's just I added an extra little bit in. And then the students turn around and go, oh, how many levels are there, Jack? And I go, about 7 or 8 right, of difficulty. And they go, what? No way. And that one, yes, I'm probably going to break down and go, right, I'm just going to add a little bit each time and add in another example. And that's not one where I think you can just let them have a go and play at all. I think, if you did that with integration by substitution, then yeah, they're not going to get very far. They're not going to get very far because they're not going to be confident on how it all works out, the mechanics of it. So some topics will work with, some it won't. But I think anything where you think the students could, maybe the students could have a go at this, they don't need me to go through it. Anytime you think that, then that's a bonus. And they can have a go. they'll make the connections better themselves than you could just by lecturing it at them.
Yeah, I think I relate to that. That sort of, you get a free bonus time when a student kind of knows what the class is going to be. Oh yeah, we know this already. We've done this before. And you go, oh, brilliant, and you can just sort of ad lib and go to the next bit. And I do ad lib quite a bit in my teaching because I often get surprised by how much certain, like even in the lower years. So I suppose one of the benefits of working at an independent school is mostly, other than A level, ironically, my class sizes are single digits to low double digits. So we can focus more on that kind of on strengthening and developing individual understanding. And then when a kid says, "Oh, I know this already," you can personalize that student's learning to go and do something else entirely. But with A level, it's usually I'm hoping that, for example, we did discriminant the other day, and every single one of the Ukrainian students has done it already because they do it in early years. They call it D, and they do the quadratic formula by working out D first and then solving it from there. So they all knew how to do that, and so that was a nice little bit of bonus time. And we recently, with further maths, finished proof by induction. And I like to do the you've probably seen it before, but the proof by induction for the optimum moves for towers of Hanoi.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, I think it's somewhere in the Further Pure 1 textbook. But I went to University of Kent maths enrichment a few years ago, and they did the Towers of Hanoi game. And there's an algorithm to solve it in the optimum number of moves. But proving by induction that because it's a recurrence relationship, right? It's the next level is 2 times the previous level plus 1, because you have to move the top end minus 1 discs, then move the bottom, then move, and it takes 2 times the previous level plus 1 to move the other disc. But then the results in closed form is just 2 to the n minus 1. So there's quite a nice proof by induction that you can do for Towers of Hanoi. And I wanted to do that as kind of an enrichment lesson as at the end before we started doing vectors. And they got the hang of how to play Towers of Hanoi straight away. And then they noticed the pattern and they just kind of did it without having to do it. So that was a nice little bonus lesson. And I do urge, if you're teaching proof by induction, have a look at the Towers of Hanoi one. It's a nice little enrichment activity. So I do want to talk about that sort of high level, the levels you were talking about integration by substitution, and how we see, for me, I see when I'm teaching GCSE, I thought, this is a grade 7 skill. I'm teaching rationalizing the denominator, or this is a grade 9 skill if I'm teaching completing the square with negative coefficients. But it's not quite as differentiated at A level into which topics follow which skill. But I am aware that we do need to do the news, which is about 8 minutes or so. So I'll take a quick break and catch up after the news. Brilliant. Cool. Thank you.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK. Home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development program, improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the program with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. we help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
Teachers, mark your calendars for BetUK 2025, the world's biggest EdTech event. Join over 30,000 educators at the Excel London from the 22nd to the 24th of January. Discover the latest EdTech innovations, network with peers and access hundreds of hours of CPD. Did we mention it's 100% free for educators? Whether you're looking for inspiration or practical tools to enhance your teaching, BET has it all. Don't miss this opportunity to shape the future of education. Register today at uk.betshow.com. That's uk.betshow.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The government has published its call for evidence for its wide-ranging curriculum review. In a feature by Schools Week, details of the process are given. The consultation will last for 8 weeks, until November the 22nd. According to the Department for Education, questions are going to be as open as possible, and they welcome responses from all interested parties, including young people and parents. An interim report is scheduled to be published in early 2025, with a final report and recommendations in autumn 2025. The chair of the review said straightforward changes could happen quickly, although government has committed to giving schools a year's notice for major curriculum and assessment reforms. The review also makes clear positives but states there are parts of the system that require improvement, particularly SEND and those pupils from poorer backgrounds. Some potential outcomes are also listed, which could include ways to alleviate some of the pressure and constraints on learners and educators, reduce the assessment burden and consider well-being, and making sure the curriculum is inclusive and accessible for all. The review may also offer commentary on the impact of accountability measures. The chair of the review, Professor Becky Francis, also told Schools Week that the biggest challenge for the review was to ensure its reforms did no harm or have unintended consequences. Alongside the call for evidence, the government has also published a study of curriculum subject trends over time to aid our evidence-led conversation, they said. Some of the data shows significantly higher numbers of students taking Maths A-level, art continuing to thrive at GCSE, but design and technology subjects faring worst over time. Further details of the statistics can be found on the Schools Week website. The Metro News website covers a story about a state secondary school which has made it into the final 3 for the World's Best School Prize for supporting healthy lives. The award was founded by the T4 Education and celebrates schools around the world that really understand their role in fostering healthy habits, behaviours, knowledge and skills. The Hindu Faith School is for pupils aged 11 to 19, and whilst their ethos is drawn from the Vaishnavist tradition of the faith, they are fully inclusive. Anyone who wants to apply to the school is able to. As well as following a traditional curriculum, the free school also teaches extra subjects like yoga, philosophy, ethics and Sanskrit. Their website says, "We put an equal emphasis on the highest academic achievement alongside the development of character and spiritual insight." The 2 other schools in the final are based in Italy and Singapore. The BBC Wales website reports that teachers could be asked to swear an oath against inappropriate relationships with pupils. a motion due to be considered by Flintshire Council could see teachers and school staff pledge in front of a manager not to form intimate relationships with students. It follows the court case of a former head teacher jailed for 17 years after being found guilty of sexual abuse. Education Union NASUWT said introducing an oath would show shocking contempt for teachers and would only bring the teaching profession into disrepute. ASCL has said it would be willing to discuss the proposal. The BBC National News website reports on new guidance for disabled students. The Equality and Human Rights Commission has published new guidance setting out what universities must do to comply with laws. Universities must proactively support disabled students rather than wait for them to ask for help. It follows the death of Bristol University student Natasha Abrahart, whose parents contributed to the new guidance. Universities must now actively seek out and adopt best practice and show real commitment to understanding and meeting diverse needs. Finally, Schools Week reports that some pupils with additional needs will be able to listen to white noise or music during their exams this year. Schools will also be able to use mental health support service referral letters to apply for extra support to ensure young people aren't disadvantaged by long waiting lists. The changes are included in the updated JCQ guidance on adjustments schools can request. SENCOs can now apply for pupils who are classed as having a substantial impairment to listen to music or white noise. This would apply to those with social, emotional and mental health needs or with a sensory impairment such as tinnitus. These adjustments apply to GCSE, A-level, BTEC and T-level qualifications. Schools must make sure devices playing the music or white noise cannot be connected to the internet and the playlist must be checked. The change meaning schools can use a referral to CAMHS or NHS trusts has also been welcomed as waiting lists for specialist services are growing. Full details of all the changes can be found on the JCQ website. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
I'm back. So, something you mentioned about the high-level A-level skills relating to a GCSE having sort of grade 7, 8, 9 topics. Are there, presumably there is a way to split skills by grade, but for example, I would say something like integration by substitution would probably be a grade A-star skill, along with some proofs by contradiction, because they always appear at the end of the paper. Is there a kind of, tiered system of topics in A-level? Like you get the factor theorem ones at the start, trig equations in the middle, and then the calculus at the end?
Ooh, that's tricky. I would like to think not. Otherwise, I would feel like lessons would be, I'm teaching proof by contradiction today, and I'm only expecting like a quarter of you to be able to understand and do it in the exam. So I don't fully agree with that. I think that maybe a student who isn't aiming for an A or an A-star might still be able to start the question, or I'd be confident that they could start or do part A. And if they can get onto part B and do a little bit of rearrangement or whatever it is, then they can make some headway. But I wouldn't like to grade particular topics. I know that obviously, as you say, there are some questions that come up earlier on that you kind of would expect to be early on questions. So like a indices or surds question or something like that. No, I agree. But those skills can then obviously be used elsewhere. So I would hope, I'm trying to make sure that my students can have a go at all questions, rather than kind of like grade them like that.
I suppose that makes sense, since the A-level, it doesn't have sets or tiers like GCSE does. So the foundation tier is going to stop at your grade 5 content, and the higher tier is going to go up to the grade 9, whereas A-level, I do wonder if some schools have like a top set A level and then a lower set A level for like if they take in a large cohort of students. If they take in say grade sixes, you've got the grade 6 and 7 class, and you've got your grade 8 and 9 class. I, I, I don't think that's the case, but I also can't think why they wouldn't. Is that anything you've ever seen that they actually tier A level other than having AS as an extra course?
It is something I've heard of, but also it's naturally done in some institutions by further maths. So with a student doing further maths, if you've got mixed groups with students doing further maths, then you could potentially be teaching from a 6 at GCSE, not doing further maths, all the way up to a 9, and they're doing further maths. So obviously the differentiation gap within a class can be absolutely huge, and that's one of the reasons we mix them, and that's one of the reasons why we also went up to the 7, so to kind of like help narrow that gap. But then you also have colleges that if they are studying further maths, then they naturally get separated into different groups. So for example, there's another college in Hampshire that does. So if you're just doing maths, you won't be taught alongside someone doing further maths, and the further maths students will all be by themselves learning A-level maths and further maths maybe combined. So either in parallel or in series. So in some cases they split them up that way, and there's this natural setting that goes on. But some, I expect there are some that also set based on, we'll just have the 9s in one group and then the 6s, 7s, 8s in another. How effective that would be, I'm unconvinced at the moment, I would say, mainly because I think the 9s offer a lot to the discussion. So they may ask quite deep questions or challenging questions that they kind of like become very good role models for the other students as well.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, but it's also about kind of like getting them to help teach each other as well.
Oh yeah, there is that aspect. I know I'm sort of kind of spitballing because I haven't seen that, and I think because it's an elective subject, they've chosen to be there rather than in GCSE where they have to do it. That you can have that kind of mix. So at our school, we have a further maths class, and we have maths classes for A level. So further maths, I have a class of 3, and they are taught separately from the others because it's actually double maths. The scheme of work is that in the first year you do all the A-level content, and then in the second year you do the further maths content. And I know that there's a discrepancy between the consecutive and parallel tiers. Some schools do it consecutively, and I think if you're going to do it the way we do it, which I suppose would be consecutively, then the further maths students being in the normal maths class, it would go out of sync because in their extra lessons, if you were doing content ahead of that you'd have to use those extra further maths lessons to do presumably further maths only content during both years. So first year would be A-level pure stats and mechanics and core pure 1 and whatever I don't know, would you do core pure 1 and one of the electives because it's core pure 1, core pure 2, and then for EdXL, and then the 2 electives, but we do it consecutively. So I'm just finishing core pure 1 with my further maths because we started it at the end of last academic year, having finished the A-level content. So that wouldn't work if they were also in the normal maths lessons because it would just go out of sync and they'd get too far ahead. So
you have to do like a restructuring because we teach them in parallel maths and further maths, but we also have different exam boards for the 2. So we're in a very rare situation where we do AQA for maths and OCR MEI for further maths. Now the reason for that, and that's one of the consequences of the new specification that you're allowed to do that. But The reason for that was that we wanted to teach them in parallel, and OCR MEI was the exam board that we did previously in the old spec, and its current specification is you're not allowed to call it modular, but it's as modular as you could possibly make it, and that offers up ways of teaching it that makes it suitable to teach alongside A-level maths. So, for example, we do the modelling with algorithms module, or unit, which is essentially the decision maths bit. We do that in the first year, and we also do the stats module as well in the first year. Once they've been taught the stats content in A-level maths. And then we have previously been doing mechanics in the second year, but also controversially, we are going to be switching that next year to numerical methods. So I expect, which is something kind of a bit more unheard of, I guess, that further math students aren't only doing a mechanics module. But that's the decision we've gone down. And for interest's sake, the reason as to why we've made that decision is because OCR MEI's mechanics module is fiendish, absolutely fiendish, to the point where we just don't think it's worthwhile to the students. You teach the content and then they go in and then they've mixed all the topics together and it looks absolutely horrific and they're just walking out fundamentally depressed. So yeah, we're switching it up to numerical methods next time round. So that'd be interesting.
Bit of Simpsons rule and the like.
Yes,
I quite like that content. One of the questions that I want to ask in a minute is about stats and mechanics, but I am considering restructuring because we have to do we do Excel, so we have to do stats and mechanics at some point, but because we get a lot of international students, one of my ideas is potentially saving statistics until the second year, because one of the expectations for our international students is that they study English as an additional language sessions to strengthen. So some come in with very, very good English. So a lot of the German students have fluent English because they learn it in school. But the Chinese, Ukrainian, some of the other students who don't have English taught in school kind of as mandatory, that they have less English, and then statistics is famously just not inaccessible, but a lot more challenging because it's more wordy and less related to other subjects. So mechanics lies in with physics quite nicely, and mechanics and all those other skills that they might already have. But the stats is a little bit more out there. So that is something I'm considering doing with obviously with a heavy international focus in our independent school, because looking at our results,
feels like it makes
the statistics sense where it falls over a bit more.
Yeah, it feels like it makes sense, given what you said. It's quite a unique position to be in. But yeah, if you leave I can't even imagine trying to do a stats module where the English isn't your first language. I can't really imagine how hard that must be.
Well, we actually had a bit more success in the previous year than we were expecting, because I'd made sure, for timing purposes, we were not going to get statistics covered, because losing time at the start and end of term and whatnot with them coming and going. But we did some extra lessons, so I got stats covered, and it bumped the grades up by, I'd say, a grade and a half across the board. So I'm glad we did that, because I do think statistics is important. But I completely understand that if you're doing sort of sampling methods or hypothesis testing with someone who is unfamiliar with or insecure with English, but good at maths, it's completely alien to them. So that is something I am considering, because I just think we've got to make it. It's got to be accessible at some point. But if we save it for when they've got a bit more practice with English, they're not seeing stats in the first year and thinking, oh God, I've got to do this again next year, and getting disheartened. They just do it all in one go when they're a bit older and have had that experience. which is difficult for me because I absolutely love statistics, and I do think that's a rarity in A-level teaching. I'm the only, I've met one or two teachers in my career who prefer stats over mechanics. Everyone seems to laud mechanics. But I'm much more of a statistics man myself. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is stats or mechanics?
No worries, Xander. I'm in your camp as well. I'm stats.
Excellent. That makes me feel a bit better. I mean, I appreciate mechanics, but there's just something about normal distributions and probability that it just clicks. I just love it, and I'm not the most visual person, which is why when it comes to teaching vectors, I am making sure I am getting them to do diagrams. Because when I first tried to do vectors, I did not do any diagrams because I was just trying to do it purely algebraically and thinking, oh, hang on a minute, there's about 15 different skills here. So yeah, mechanics is. I mean, I am teaching upper sixth mechanics at the moment, and I am quite enjoying it because I haven't done it for a while because we had another teacher doing mechanics, but I thought time to jump back in that ring, and it's pretty fun. I like having all the little discussions about real life applications, and a lot of them want to go on to do astrophysics or engineering, so I'm all over that. But stats just has that little extra, other than the large data set, because it's geography. I don't know if that comes up in the OCR and AQA, but Edexcel has the large data set added to the first chapter of A-level stats, and it is just geography.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a large data set for each of the different examples. MEI is even more peculiar because they've got 3 different data sets which are on a rolling year by year. So it changes each year.
Oh, that is why.
Which is must be horrendous to teach it, but thankfully, obviously not for further maths. But yeah, AQA's one is all about cars. Is on the essentially they've chosen a year's either side of the emissions scandal. It's got some kind of like good context to it, but yeah, the questions, much like for Edexcel, are so surface that it's not really worth having as part of the A level in its current structure, anyway.
I do think there is a restructuring potentially on the. I know there's that new modular GCSE that's on the horizon, and I think, like for example, the A level textbooks they have questions on it that they don't teach directly. Set notation, integration, parametric integration are 2 of the main candidates. They actually errated the textbook to have a bit more of that in there, and then the integration as a limit of the sum got tacked on right at the end. So it feels slightly incomplete, so I've had to add in a few pieces into my scheme of work.
There is a textbook available, isn't there?
I know! I can't imagine...
I'm allowed to say anything more than that.
No.
But thankfully there is one. But no, that all came about because of the rush with the current specification. The time frame to get the current specifications out and going and textbooks ready was so rushed that the Edexcel and I think the AQA textbooks as well, they both missed out parametric integration. And the Edexcel one, I think they had to print like an additional bit that you could have, but it's really not very good. I mean, case in point for AQA, they've got their specification document, which is essentially a copy of the DFE guidance that was originally printed. And then they've got a teaching guidance second document, which explains everything more thoroughly, thankfully. But part of that, I originally thought parametric integration wasn't in the A-level math specification. And then this teaching guidance has some exemplar questions. And I found one of the questions was parametric integration. But it was not mentioned as parametric integration in the specification. So I had to say to AQA, what's going on? Is it in the specification? And they went, yeah, it is meant to be in there. Okay, right, great. maybe you want to tell all the other teachers teaching.
I mean, I suppose one could pass it off as integration by substitution because it does follow a similar principle. But yeah, that raised a few eyebrows back in when I started teaching the A level, the new 2018 A level. That was a bit of a hang on a minute, where does this come from? And then
you'd still teach it specifically, right? You wouldn't just like teach them integration by substitution and then think the students will know what parametric integration is going to look like.
You definitely cover it, but
you still have to like specifically teach it. So
that was my theory, that they were trying to sneak it in as substitution because it's still not in the A-level textbook as a specific chapter. It's just tacked on. I can't remember if it's in the mixed exercise or somewhere in. I'm fairly sure it's right at the end, but there are a few questions on it, but no actual mentioning of it.
Yeah.
So, yes, I feel like that's due an update. Because, I mean, if not, I'm just going to rewrite our sort of syllabus and base it on EdXL, but make time for the extra bits. Like, I might teach it in a slightly different order. You know, there's no reason why Chapter 5 has to be equations of a straight line when Chapter 3 requires you to be able to sketch a straight line.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is, and it depends on how brave you are, because essentially the linear nature of A-level maths allows you to teach it in whatever order you want. You don't have to teach all of the AS content first. Some teachers like that, and I am one of those teachers that have been made sure that all of the first year content is covered, the AS content is covered first, because on the rare occasion, and I mean very rare, because as I said, you've got nearly 600 students in each year group, and we had like 3 end up doing the AS maths as within the first year. So I still had to kind of like make sure it was available for them. But yeah, if you weren't offering AS maths, then you could, bring in partial fractions into the first year and do whatever you want, really. Students would be able to do that, but it's just down to how brave you're feeling, really.
Well, I'm as Pete Buttigieg says, I'm plenty bold, but it's something I need to sit down and think about for the next academic year, because I think there are some things. I'm tutoring a couple of people, one of whom it says, they've started to year 13. And he said, we've been doing product rule, quotient rule. I'm thinking, how have you had the time to get that covered unless you've skipped the first 4 topics? But I'm guessing that they just teach some of the year 2 content in year 1. So they've done differentiation and then they've done all of it. Or as much of it as they could reasonably do. Like, you can't do parametric integration without parametric equations. But product rule, quotient rule, I mean, to me, that strikes me as a bit too much to take on in the first year, and also you want to have something to come back to in the second year as differentiation recap. But
you want to space it, right? Space it out.
Certainly not do all the integration in 1 year. Blimey.
No, and there are still things that, even though we try and make sure we've covered the AS content in the first year, there are things from the second year that we pull in. So we teach radians when we teach all the trig, for example. So we'll do the trapezium rule before I've done, or just after I've done definite integrals. I think we do it after, or it's either before or after, I can't remember. So we do that then, and also with forces as well. So we go straight on to coefficient of friction, get it on a slope. So we do teach some of that stuff together if we can, which kind of fits in. But no, I've never kind of like been, let's teach all the differentiation together, or let's teach all the integration together. I just don't. I can imagine there being some misconceptions that get baked in there that I'd be worried about. I think it's just got too many bits.
Yeah, well, that's something I'm going to go away and look at for my own sort of A-level syllabus and see if we can optimize it slightly. I do have one hot take question to ask you. It's not about A-level, but should trigonometry be in foundation?
No.
Agreed.
Let's
I'd
go.
like. Should Pythagoras? I mean, I'm more forgiving for Pythagoras because it's got the real world applications of like.
Yeah,
I know trigonometry does, but I've been teaching it to my sort of top foundation crossover higher, and they're sort of all right with trigonometry. But if you've got a class that's trying to get from a grade 3 to a grade 4, and I just think trigonometry is far too abstract for the foundation course, and I'm glad I found another person who agrees with me on that one because it doesn't go down too well. I find.
I think you'd probably be hard pushed to find someone who thinks it should be. It's a very peculiar thing to have in foundation, to have trigonometry there. I mean, I don't teach GCSE reset classes anymore. I haven't taught that for 10 years since I worked at my previous college. But I can still imagine like trying to teach them that, and I'm just like going, all it would be is I'm teaching them a calculator process. I can't imagine that I wouldn't be able to go into any of the understanding as to why we're doing what we're doing. So yeah, I think it would just be so surface. It's not needed. There's so many other things on GCSE. I mean, when because at the moment I'm trying to make the GCSE videos on YouTube, and the specification is so huge. I don't think I'd quite realised how big it was when I started the project. And it just goes on and on and on, all this stuff. And to have that in there as well, it's just, I don't think it's very fair.
Well, I look forward to that because if you do the IGCSE higher end content, I will be very pleased to use those for reference points for my classes, because I always say, here's a video tutorial if you need a recap on the lessons, and they do seem to go down quite well. So I'm glad that we have that same opinion on trigonometry. I thought it was a bit of a hot take, but I'm glad I'm glad there is reasoning behind it. So I am conscious of time. It's a bit of a late start, so I'm going to play the news again, and then I think I'll do the outro. So I will thank you very much for joining it. I genuinely, it was a bit of a punt. I thought, it would be great to have him on, because one of the, I think, best math communicators there are, because it's short, it's punchy, it's not like a 20-minute video. You can do it in pieces. It's like the structure I really like, and I don't want to kind of be obsequious, but it's one of the reasons why I think I wanted to have you on this show, because I just wanted to talk to someone who has that experience of how to deliver things in a compact and easy to understand way that my students seem to really rate. So thank you very much for coming on, and it's been great to talk to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. And I don't do this kind of thing often, so if I'd be happy to do it again. So just let me know.
Excellent. Well, I wish you a good day, and I'll play the news in to see us out. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK. Home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development program, improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the program with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
Teachers, mark your calendars for BetUK 2025, the world's biggest EdTech event. Join over 30,000 educators at the Excel London from the 22nd to the 24th of January. Discover the latest EdTech innovations, network with peers and access hundreds of hours of CPD. Did we mention it's 100% free for educators? Whether you're looking for inspiration or practical tools to enhance your teaching, BET has it all. Don't miss this opportunity to shape the future of education. Register today at uk.betshow.com. That's uk.betshow.com.
This is